Hello, you're watching rptv and my name is Kedar. In the heart of Toronto's housing crisis, activists and community members gathered outside City Hall to protest the sale of 214-230 Sherbourne Street to KingSett Capital, a private equity firm known for profit-driven developments. This property, once intended for affordable housing, has become a symbol of the city's struggle to support its most vulnerable residents. Our coverage takes place in two parts. The first one in front of Toronto's City Hall, where activists rallied to spotlight the urgency surrounding Toronto's housing crisis. And part two, inside City Hall, where impassioned deputations urged local leaders to fight for a more equitable future. Let's go to City Hall now and see how things unfolded.
Yeah, hi. So my name is Gaetan from 230 Fight Back. We're in front of City Hall. There's a meeting that's going to happen today at around 10 o'clock. The Toronto and East York Community Council is going to vote on an agenda, which is the KingSett's application. We already know that the city planners have recommended the approval. We also know that Chris Moyse, because we emailed him, told us that he was going to recommend to accept the recommendations of staff. And we're here today, a whole bunch of us, to tell Moyse and members of the Community Council that to reject that application. And to warn them that whoever, in the end has that property, whether it's KingSett has a habit of selling properties after, but we're trying to tell them that anybody who tries and come to that territory, they have to understand they're entering, there's a territory that has minefields, and that we're going to fight back. That we have no intention of letting them build this condo on that site, and that's the message we want to send today. There's a lot of opposition, a decade long of worth of organizing that's happened, and staff seems to have totally ignored that, and Moyse is not interested. He's had a year and a half to work with KingSett to try and buy the properties, and they can't reach a deal. KingSett's asking for too much. The city's not willing to pay that much. The fact that they can't get their act together is their problem. And in terms of us at Dundas and Sherbourne, we're going to be their problem when they try and build a condo tower on there.
My name is Megan, and I'm an organizer with More Demovictions, and I'm here today to stand in solidarity with our friends and fellow organizers at 230 Fight Back, who've been advocating for the site at 214-230 Sherbourne to be turned into affordable housing for almost a decade. And I'm fundamentally here because I believe companies and developers like KingSett Capital are not going to solve the housing crisis. They are the housing crisis, and we need to be able to build affordable, social, and non-market housing to be able to solve the housing crisis. And the kind of condos that KingSett Capital wants to build at this site is not going to better the community. All it's going to do is maximize their profits. And one thing that we know that KingSett Capital does is they will buy land, they will propose a development on that land, and then they will sell that land. They will never actually develop on the site. And that's something that happened at my friend's building at 135 Isabella. And so we're here to support 230 Fight Back because this site represents a lot more than just this development. It really signifies an empty lot zoned for density that could be used to build affordable social housing, but is being sold off to developers because the city tried to buy it but could not compete with for-profit developers. And this signifies a real issue that needs to be faced. One of the things that I'm going to put forward in my deputation is a potential solution for the city to advocate to the province for a first right of refusal legislation. They have it in Quebec. It means that the city and municipalities have the ability to be able to buy the land before developers have that opportunity. And this means that demevictions are less likely to happen. And it means that all that money that the federal government is giving to the province to give to municipalities can actually be spent in a viable way to build housing that people actually need.
And so we're going to get started. So what we're going to do is we're going to have some people speaking. Many of the people speaking outside here will be giving deputations, some not. We're encouraging people to go inside after and to stay as long as you can. It'd be nice at the beginning to have people there. And but if you can't stay like after 15 minutes, half hour, that's fine. But just to show that present at first, we are not sure where in the agenda we're going to be. So we're yeah. Okay, so here we go, folks. I'm going to start this segment. I'm Gay Tom from 230 Fightback. I'm going to be the MC today. I acknowledge here that we're on stolen land. I'm going to give you a little different kind of land acknowledgement. And what I'm going to give you is 3 quotes from one. The first quote is from Sun Bear from the Chippewa Nation. He says, I do not think the measure of a civilization is how tall its buildings of concrete are, but rather how well its people have learned to relate to their environment and to fellow man. I think it's a wonderful quote in terms of what we're doing today, in terms of the message we want to send. The next one is also valid because the amount of time that we're given to address this issue, it'll be probably about 3 minutes each. I'm not too sure. It's not a lot of time, but Chief Joseph had a very good quote also. He says, "It does not require many words to speak the truth." Very well said. So we can say what we have to say if we're speaking the truth, and it won't take long. And the last one, which for me is also one of the most important one, is from Dennis Banks from the American Indian Movement. He says, "Through our collective struggles, we find our strengths." And this is exactly what we're doing today. We're collectively struggling around the issue of housing, and together we'll find our strength to fight these people. This guy won't shut up, but so he wasn't invited. So, okay, so just a brief introduction in terms of why we're here. So we found out about a week ago that the city's report came out, and in the report, the staff, city planners, are recommending approval of KingSett Capital's application. We also found out, because we emailed Moise to ask him what his how he's going to vote, and we received an email a couple of days ago that he said that he was going to vote for the approval. So our message today, so you understand, that means that basically no councillor will vote against Moise or the planners, and it's very likely that the plan is to go ahead and just push this forward, which means it opens the door now for KingSett to build a tower, but also to sell the property to somebody else who will develop it. And our message today will be clear, that we want them to reject this application, but more importantly, that even if they pass it, that they're in for a fight. So that's the message we want to send today. And so our first speaker is Allison from All Saints Church. So Allison, if you want.
That lead to
What's that?
sense of kind of therapeutic knowledge.
Oh, there's coffee and donuts over here too, after apparently. Oh, right now. So Allison, if you want to speak, so if you want to introduce yourself. Yeah.
Perhaps even in leading
Thanks,
to
Gaetan.
to help that.
My name is Allison Falvey, and I'm the priest director at All Saints Church Community Center, which is right across the street from the proposed KingSett Capital development. Dundas and Sherbourne has been an intersection of need for over 60 years. All Saints first began advocating for affordable housing in the neighborhood in 1968. We started a drop-in center in 1970 and opened Canada's first overnight church respite, what's now called Out of the Cold, in 1972. And since then, Toronto's housing crisis has gotten worse, not better. With gentrification coming from all directions, Dundas and Sherbourne has become the corner of last resort. An increasing number of people without housing call Dundas and Sherbourne home. And these people will not be able to afford the condominiums proposed for Sherbourne Street, whether they are built by KingSett Capital or Fitzrovia Real Estate or any other for-profit developer. The Fitzrovia development has already been approved. KingSett Capital's has not. And that does mean, in theory, that there is still a chance to build housing for people without homes in a neighborhood that can support them. And at an intersection that has supported some of Toronto's most vulnerable people for over 60 years. This may seem obvious, but it deserves to be stated. People are homeless because they don't have housing. And while All Saints Church does its best to support people who are struggling, the church is not a house. We are not able to house people. And if we as a city want to solve homelessness, we have to build housing for the people who don't have it. And that we can include developers if they are so inclined. We have been here before. In the 60s and 70s, developers were buying up and demolishing rooming houses across Toronto, and especially in what we now call Toronto's downtown east. In August 1970, the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation partnered with a private developer named Fred Breda to build Canada's first high-rise rooming house, designed by architect Thomas Kuhlman. Located north of Dundas at 266 Sherbourne Street, a 13-story building with 120 units opened less than 18 months later. 53 years later, it is still standing and still providing studio apartments for $1,200 a month or less. Now, that is not perfect. That is not deeply affordable housing. Still, at the time it was constructed, it represented an innovative approach to the housing crisis of the time. We are at another crisis point, which, if the city chooses, can be an opportunity to help the most vulnerable among us rather than placing the profit motive above all other considerations. So I am here to request that the Toronto East York Community Council reject KingSett Capital's current proposal to build a condominium at 214-230 Sherbourne.
Intensive care describes an approach.
Instead, All Saints asks both the city and KingSett to seek an alternative development that would provide housing for the people who are already living at Dundas and Sherbourne. And this housing should be deeply affordable and supportive. I have serious concerns about what will happen to the safety of our neighbors if this proposal goes through in its current form. With the impending closure of 3 overdose prevention sites, we are already expecting overdoses to increase at our corner. The whole reason we have the overdose prevention sites was in response to pleas from the paramedics because we had the highest number of 911 calls due to overdose in the city. We know that homelessness is a significant factor in drug abuse, and the closure of the overdose prevention sites, coupled with further gentrification, will push our city's most vulnerable people into deserted alleyways and quite likely death. The empty lot at 214-230 Sherbourne offers a historic opportunity to provide housing for those who need it most, the people who don't have it. Thank you.
So I know the situation with KingSett, which started in 2019 when the agencies that are here wrote a letter to the mayor. We know that KingSett had offered to sell it back. We know that there have been all sorts of back and forth, and now we hear there is something likely to happen soon. But I'll tell you what's going on with housing. I have a client. This guy was hit by a car some time back, about 4 or 5 years ago. He was left for dead. But the people who were around there rushed in, they picked him up, they called the ambulance, they got him to St. Mike's. He was in a coma for like 3-4 months. His sister came from Calgary, and she told me he wants to take him because he will not be alive. And I told them that that's between them. And so he's here. Now, he's having big problems. So the other day, 2 weeks ago, I talked to him and I say, my friend, your legs are bad. You can hardly walk. And if you, and he used to stay at Good Shepherd, there's no place. So I told him now, if you go back to the street, which is just happening, I can't get you to Good Shepherd, there's no bed. I can't get you anywhere. You will be in the streets. And the way your health is, you'll be dead in a short time. He told me that would be wonderful. Can it happen fast? And I got shocked. But what this guy is telling, this is a guy who loves his life. My first reaction was, I should call the sister. But what this guy is telling me is, what's the difference between the life I'm living and being dead? There's no point being alive. So this guy is not suicidal. This guy loves his life. But he's telling me that the life he has now, he's better off dead. And he means it. He wasn't joking. He wasn't just trying to scare me. He was telling me the life you have put me in, there's no point. It's a waste of life. That is what our people are dealing with now because we don't have the shelter. There was a time you would call a shelter and they'll go there. I remember the last time we were here with Getan, we had a client who said he wants to talk to the mayor himself. And one of the mayor's people came and he told them he has been calling the shelters for a month. He can't get it. So he asked the mayor, can you call the shelter for me, please? So they took him. And I think after maybe several hours, they got a place. So that's happening. The other thing happening is if you go to the Anderson Sherbourne, you take Seton Street, which goes to Shooter, or you take Ontario. The Seton Street at Shooter, there is a park, car park next. So people just set their own living space next to the park because the park is not a private place, so nobody's going to kick them out. So they are in there, and it's a mess. I walk there going home, they are lying there. I come back, they are lying there, sometimes covered in snow. That's where they live, and that's where they expect to live for a long time. And lastly, I had a client who had serious OPS problems, and it was really life-threatening for her. So finally, when they started OPS at Street Health, where I work, I took her to them, and she worked with them. After a couple months, she basically told me, you know what? I don't need you. I need them because they'll keep me alive. That's what people need because they're basically telling you, you can talk all you want, but I need someone who can help me be alive. That's more important to them than all the talk. So we are dealing with a situation which is more than desperate. And it is about, this city is too big. I mean, like, I lived in a refugee camp. I used to tell people that in a foreign country, it was way better than being a homeless person in this country. I had food. I had a place to live. I had health care. And I'm in a refugee camp. And you live here in the biggest city in this country, and you are worse than people who live in refugee camps. That is the greatest shame of all. Thank you.
Developers run this city. That's hardly news, especially since Premier Doug Ford made it clear who he serves. We all know how neutered municipal planners are in favor of developers. Less obvious is how developers are effectively buying their way through municipal obstacles in the form of official plans and zoning laws. In the process, Mayor Olivia Chow, councillors, and city planners have abrogated their responsibility to do the right thing. In the face of developer money, they shrug their shoulders and roll over. Developers such as KingSett and Fitzrovia, which in fact is bankrolled by public money from Alberta, are given free rein to make money in our city while giving crumbs back. Developers are not building our city. They're sucking money out and they're leaving brokenness behind. In this case, they want to build luxury condominiums and upscale apartments with rents to match on Sherbourne Street in the downtown east. It's a neighborhood where, as we've heard, basic housing is being shut down and rents rise at an alarming rate, and councillors wring their hands. It's a neighborhood where far, far too many people struggle to find basic shelter or access basic social services, and councillors wring their hands. It's unconscionable that developers, aided and abetted by council, are allowed to extract as much wealth as they can from our city and its residents, no matter what the social cost. That social cost? A growing number of tents and encampments in the shadow of luxury condos and luxury apartments. The misery of the unhoused and the underhoused, unheard, behind a wall of money and political indifference. Another slice of the population facing the edge of affordability and wondering if they're the next wave of homelessness. Is this really the city or the province or the country we want? We urge council to do the right thing. Thanks for your time.
We're very alarmed by a situation like at Sherbourne here. We keep hearing over and over, you have to build, you have to build, you have to build. But we also see stories, there's all these condos going unsold. So what's the motive here? It's not to supply housing, because if it were, we would do social housing. Those are the people who need it. The supply side argument is premised on this idea of filtering, which is like trickle-down housing. If they just build enough in the middle, eventually it'll come down to us. Problem is that takes a generation or more to take effect. So if you're trying to force it through to make a quick buck, you got a lot of problems. I'm going to hand it over now to a couple of our tenant activists. First up, Megan.
Thank you. I'm going to do my best to keep this as short as possible here today to support 230 Fight Back in solidarity with their fight to turn this site into affordable housing, which has been a 10-year-long endeavor. What should be driving housing development is a focus on affordability, adequate living space, and green spaces that improve communities for everybody. What is actually driving housing is the need for profit. It's the shrinkflation of housing where you're spending way more and you're getting way less. Towers of over 60 stories with 80% one-bedroom, 500 square foot units are being built to maximize profits without considering who's actually going to live in those units and the impact that that has. I'm going to keep this as short as I possibly can, but the basic premise is that developers like KingSett Capital, for-profit developers, are not going to solve our housing crisis, because in fact they actually are our housing crisis. This crisis has never been more lucrative for companies like KingSett, who have $18 billion worth in assets. When my friend's affordable rental building of 80 units was approved for demolition to be turned into condos by KingSett Capital, who will be speaking next, their lawyer, Cynthia McDougall, said this: "I know it's always difficult to remove rental units and replace them. However, what's worse, in fact, is if there is no change." Actually, what's worse, in fact, is that the limited supply of affordable purpose-built rental units is being replaced by condos that only investors can afford. What's worse, in fact, is that we rely on for-profit developers to build all of our housing based on the principle of maximizing profits and not improving communities. And what's worse, in fact, is being told by the people causing the problem that they are the solution. The solution is right in front of us, and yet we fail to see it because we're told by developers and politicians alike, it doesn't matter what kind of housing we build, just that we build it. In fact, it does matter what kind of housing we build. Condo sales in July were at a 27-year low. Why? Because all that is on the market are tiny, unlivable, expensive boxes that even investors won't gamble on when interest rates are high. So now, not only do we have housing sitting empty, while there are over 10,000 people experiencing homelessness in this city, but if no one pre-buys these expensive condos, it will halt the development of the only housing we are currently building. Affordable, social, and non-market housing is the only solution. And that's the reason we're standing here today with 230 Fight Back, and we want this development denied. I'm going to pass it over to Irene, whose building at 135 Isabella was approved for demolition and redevelopment by KingSett Capital, and she'll tell you how that has developed since.
Thanks, Megan. Thanks, K-Town, for having us here today. So I live at 135 Isabella Street, a purpose-built rental building, rent control, in fine condition, that was sold, that KingSett bought, and they immediately decided to submit it for redevelopment, unshockingly. I'll give you a little bit of a picture of the neighborhood that I live in. It's right in the middle of the gentrification process. We have some people who have recently moved in who are wealthier because of the newer developments that were completed. We also have a temporary shelter nearby for unhoused people. We also have Casey House, which helps people who are extremely sick, who need it, and who have a safety injection site. We also have Life House, who provides housing to people who are in desperate need of it. This is the neighborhood that I'm in. When I was in a meeting with the tenants, with one of the staff members of KingSett Capital, Paul Giancos, he said that people with unwanted behavior, such as that, should be policed more because they are the problem in the city.
Shame.
How dare he? People are falling under the cracks because of companies like KingSett Capital, because of developers, because of capitalists who want more money because whatever they have is never, ever enough. The city approved the redevelopment on June 26th of this year. Yesterday, a mere 3 months later, we found on the internet that our building is up for sale. Wow. So this was never about housing. This was about land flipping. This was about KingSett Capital making the most amount of money for as little effort. This was never, ever about building housing. And this is one of the many reasons why we are in this housing affordability crisis. There should be no land flipping. And what's to stop KingSett from having their development approved today and 3 months later, flip it for more money because that is what they want. People in my building have already been pushed out. We already have residents who have left because they cannot handle the emotional warfare that comes with this, the stress and anxiety, and in some cases, depression. This is what it is. It's not just, oh, well, you know, when you get evicted, you'll figure it out. It happens as soon as that submission application is put in, and tenants are the ones who lose every single time. So to developers, to city councilors, to MPPs at Queen's Park, and to those who represent us at the federal level, you can't say that building housing is something you're doing and that you're part of the solution, because unless deeply affordable housing is part of your solution, then you are part of the problem. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Okay, so we're going to get ready to go in a second. I'm just going to finish by just giving you a little bit of the history, because I don't know how much time they're going to give us in there, and I'm not going to go through the history of those councillors. But so, for people who don't know, if you go to the corner of Dundas and Sherbourne, just south of there, across from All Saints Church, where Allison is every day, and you'll see a couple of vacant lots in an abandoned old Victorian house that used to be a rooming house up until going back to 1911. The properties were bought by the Tenija family between 1986 and 1996 for they paid $865,000 for the properties. In 2008, all three rooming houses were on the property were boarded up. 2 of them were demolished. The city tried to buy the properties from the Tenija family, but they refused, and the city refused to expropriate. And it was in March 2022 that KingSett Capital intervened because the properties came up for sale. The city tried to buy the properties because they wanted to build social housing, but they're outbid by KingSett Capital. KingSett Capital paid $53 million for that property. That's what's happening in the community. And the city can't compete with multi-billion-dollar private equity companies. No one can. And that's what's happening at Dundas and Sherbourne all along the Dundas corridor. And today, and the last thing is that apparently for the last year and a half, KingSett offered to sell back the property to the city, and they've been negotiating for a year and a half, but they can't agree on the price. According to the city, KingSett is asking too much. According to KingSett, this is the money they want. And now we're at a point where they put in an application to continue and get permission to build their $46. So today, the message we want to send to them is very clear. That whatever you do today, because we doubt you're going to do the right thing, whatever you do today, you have to understand that whoever tries to come to that territory to develop a tower in there, they have to understand that they're stepping on the landmine. There's going to be a fight, and they have to understand that, and they have to understand that anybody who supports that, anybody who supports people who want to do that, whether it's the planners, the city planners, whether it's city council, or whether it's the people who finance them, or whether it's Bennett and Jones, who are the lawyers for KingSett, or whether it's John Baird, who's the KingSett lobbyist for KingSett, that we're not going to let that happen. And today I want them to understand that's the message we have to leave with, because we've mobilized. It's been a decade. That has sat empty for 16 years. And the message we say today is that's going to be social housing. Whatever your effing vote is, that's going to be social housing. I don't care what you say. I don't care what you do. I don't care that the other councillors are afraid to vote against the city planners, or other councillors are afraid to vote against Chris Moyes. There is not going to be a condo built there. So I'm going to ask everybody to go up right now, because we're a bit late. It's almost 22, and they might be starting by 10. So if you can stay as long as you can, the deputations, we don't know exactly when they're going to start. So please, people, make your way up there. I got to bring this stuff back to the car, and we'll go from there. Okay?
Hey, I just want to say a quick message to bring the message directly. What is taking place? How we have councillors now want to speak out against developers, speak about the deep pockets of these corporations, the profits and exploitation of our neighbors. We want to let these councillors know whatever vote has to be made for the people. For if it's not for people, it's not for the interests of the individuals going to be residing in these spaces, and not for profits. That's the exploitation of the common worker and individuals within our social systems. And we got to call that out. And we got to let these folks know we're watching. Everybody's watching. And this is going to be a fight, because this is to resonate all across. It's not Toronto, but to let everybody know in Ontario, these decisions need to be held accountable, and they need to be called out. Specifically, if you have Chris Moyes to vote for a policy, for a decision that's favoring profits over people, that's bullshit. Come on.
Here, here.
Yeah. So we got to make sure we say something, speak out. Thank you for all the folks coming here. Let's get this.
The next item is item 16.5, 214 to 230 Sherbourne Street Visual Plan and Zoning Bylaw Amendment application. We do have speakers on this item. First speaker here is John Clark. John Clark, are you here? Okay. Okay, you have 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Well, thank you very much. I think I can probably do better than 5 minutes. I've been involved in the life of the community that surrounds this site, this location, for a very, very long time, and I'm aware of how pressing the needs are in that hard-pressed community for housing solutions that meet the needs of the community. Seeing this recommendation before you, like many people here, I think I'm distressed but not entirely surprised. And that being the case, I just simply wanted to stress for the record 2 essential points. The first is the extreme importance of this site and the surrounding area. It really is at the heart of an area that faces enormous difficulties and enormous problems and great injustices. And the need for housing at that location, which is really at the intersection that is absolutely pivotal, is so utterly decisive and so utterly important. And conversely, to have that site become instead another development for upscale housing would be harmful and destructive in ways that I don't think it's possible to exaggerate. Would have an enormously retrograde impact on the community in terms of gentrification and displacement, the ongoing process of displacement that has impacted that community for so long. The second point I simply wanted to make is this, is that for years, not just a couple of years, but for years, there has been effort by the community in that area to ensure that housing was built at that location that met people's needs, social housing. I was an organiser with the Ontario Coalition Against Poverty. We were part of that in those days. 230 Fight Back, that I'm now part of, was also part of that struggle. But I'm not saying anything here today that local people and advocates and service providers in that area wouldn't amplify and thoroughly agree with. So I'll just say this, whatever you decide here today, you're not going to remove the necessity, you're not going to remove the need. There is a determined effort underway to ensure that that location not become KingSett's castle, but that it become instead a place that really does meet the needs of the community, that provides vitally needed social housing. I don't anticipate any questions, and I'm not sure you'd like my answers, so thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, please do not clap. You could do this if you'd like, okay? It's disruptive to the meeting. Erin Wotherspoon, are you here?
I am.
Okay, you have 5 minutes.
Okay. So, I think it's an utter shame that the city has not listened to community members who for years have advocated for sorely needed social housing at this property. Every single progressive city councillor should be ashamed to accept this proposal, including Mayor Chow. It is clear and sad that so-called progressive city councillors are quick to overlook community demands for affordable housing when faced with KingSett's deep pockets. It is equally troubling that today, instead of fighting for affordable housing, you will all likely vote in favor of for-profit housing. It is likely you will all cede the demands of KingSett, the demands of a greedy developer who is turning the city into an unaffordable condo wasteland. This is a developer that does not care at all about the communities they are developing in. KingSett has come after community groups for legal fees. I've actually sat in on community consultation meetings where KingSett staff, Tom Giancos and Ingrid Beausoleil, have admitted to knowing nothing about the communities they're seeking to develop in. It is disturbing and gross that this is the city planning process in our communities. The last thing this city needs right now is another 46-story luxury condo. It actually makes no sense. These condos are sitting empty all over the city. Many media outlets have reported on these statistics. No one is buying these condos. The vast majority of them are studio and one-bedroom units. They are ridiculously small and grossly overpriced. No one can afford them, no one wants them, and they are not suitable for families. I urge all of the councillors here today to reject this proposal, to actually listen to the communities you represent, to hear their needs, cede to us, the people. I'd also like to say that I find this process very disturbing. It appears that none of the city councillors even listen. Everyone sits there on their phones and they drink lattes. They leave the room. It's actually really disturbing that this is our planning process. Like, is this the city you all want to live in? It's not the city I want to live in. I mean, no one's even, I'm barely making eye contact with anyone here. I don't know, like what's, well, it doesn't appear that way for a lot of us.
Have a deputy, are you finished?
Well, the two
deputing?
other counselors,
Counselors?
Bradford and Josh.
Me, that isn't appropriate.
Why is it inappropriate? I don't think it is.
You're here to depute. Your time is still running.
I'm well aware of that.
Yes, and you know, it's very unprofessional to actually speak to counselors that way.
Well, I think it's unprofessional of them to sit on their phones while the communities they supposedly represent speak to them. This is supposed to be a democracy, a representative democracy, so.
Can I, just on a point of a privilege, I just want to make it clear that we are working when we're sitting here because we have multiple obligations, and if we're running out of the room or we're writing an email, it's because we're serving 110, 150,000 constituents and are sitting on multiple committees at the same time. So I hope that people don't believe that we're not paying attention. When we go to our offices, we are listening to you. I think the question here is, why are there 25 counselors? Why is the piling process the way it is? We can't answer that at this committee. Why did the provincial government change it? So even if, I don't mind if you hold that time, I just want to make, I think it's important that you don't feel that we're ignoring you.
Well, I do appreciate you saying that, and I think that speaking to that is good. But yes, from my vantage point, and I'm sure other people's vantage points as well, it does look like we're not being listened to at all. So just throwing that out there.
Fair, we hear you. Are you, any other further comments?
That's it.
I do have one question though.
Sure.
For this particular application, do you understand why a rezoning is being proposed?
Pardon?
For this particular application at 214, 230 Sherbourne Street?
Yes.
What's being asked here is a official plan and zoning bylaw amendment. Do you understand what that means?
Well, no, we've had multiple emails with your office and no one speaks in a way that the actual layperson can understand. So the answer to that question is no. We got a very cryptic email from one of your staff members. So if you'd care to, just explain it in a way that the public, not, bureaucrats can understand, we're all ears.
Okay. Well, I will ask staff a few questions and then I'll speak to this item and perhaps I'll try to use common language that.
Please do. We'd all appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. Next person up is McDonald. Sorry, Ms. Weatherspoon, Councilor Fletcher has a question for you. And I've asked several times, please do not clap.
It's okay. No, just do your jazz hands because we all know what's going on there. Thank you. Just on this application, the applicant technically could put affordable housing here, but I believe has decided not to.
Right.
Do you think, and then use the community, you know that we used to be able to get the Section 37.
I do,
and then it changed at the province, and then there's something called CBCs, which are these monies for housing.
Yeah.
Would you, and I do understand that this developer does not ever add affordable, because I've had that conversation many times. So what would your suggestion be to the city about having that requirement around the community benefit charges at that location, if there's any possibility to require that rather than leave that up to the developer? Yeah,
well, I do understand that the province has made it pretty tricky for the city to advocate for the inclusion of affordable housing. I mean, it's my understanding that some of these, city councilors such as yourself do take meetings with these KingSett folks. So I'm wondering if there's any way we can bring them to the table at least, or is it just, I mean, they can't be, some of them are here. I don't know. Can we just chat with them, Tom? I guess you could do that in the hallway if you wanted to do that. But I understand some of their developments are part of the Housing Now plan, and that's where the affordable housing would go, and I'm unsure. I'll ask the staff that because I'm
just wondering about what that mix looks like there in this area of great need, which we know about Sherbourne. So I will ask that when I have a chance to ask the staff, okay?
Yeah, there
We don't
must
do
be
that yet.
something.
We're hearing from you first, and then we get a chance to publicly ask.
Okay, and I'm sure there's other people here who can answer that better than myself. I'm in Parkdale, but yeah, I appreciate the question.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you. McDonald Scott.
Hello.
You have 5 minutes. Go ahead.
I work with the law firm Carenza LLP, and as you know, Alejandra, I also work with a group called No One Is Illegal. I have a privilege on the second Wednesday of every month to meet with non-status poor people at the Regent Park Community Health Center. Those people will not be served by this condominium. When I go into Seton House to meet with non-status people who are basically just come right off the street, they won't get a unit in that condo. We saw what happened at Regent Park. We saw where we were promised every bed would be replaced. We saw that those units were de-indexed and put up to market rents, and my people could not live in those buildings. I urge you, there are good people on this committee and this council. I urge you to do everything you can to make 230 into low-income housing, complete low-income housing. The mixed use, we've seen it go badly. It says right on the KingSett website that this will not be a mixed income development. I urge you not to pass this bylaw. Pass this bylaw when someone comes forward with low-income housing for that place. And I would also put in mind that we have fought for this for 10 years and will continue to fight, and we will fight for this to be low-income housing. I thank you for your time, and barring any questions, I will see you on the streets.
Thank you. I appreciate you being so succinct. Megan Key? Megan Key, are you here? Megan Key? Okay, 5 minutes, go ahead.
My name is Megan, and I'm an organizer with No Demovictions. I'm here today to support my friends and fellow organizers at 230 Fight Back, who have been advocating for the site to be turned into affordable housing for almost a decade. The site at 230 Sherbourne highlights a serious problem with housing in this city. What should be driving housing development is a focus on affordability, density, adequate living space, green spaces that improve the quality of life for everyone. But what is actually driving housing development is profit. It's the shrinkflation of housing, where you're paying more but getting less. Towers of over 60 stories with 80% one-bedroom, 500-square-foot apartments are being built to maximize profits without considering who's going to live in them and the implications that that has. Many people are no longer having children, are spending over 60% of their income on rent, and are forced to rely on food banks to survive. There's no freedom in our housing. There's no opportunity to buy, even if we wanted to, no opportunity to move because everything is unaffordable, and there's a constant fear of renting an apartment built after 2018. And what is causing this to happen? Well, investors own 56.4% of recently completed condos in Toronto, and then these condos are being sold back to us at a premium without rent control. And what I'm building to is that developers like KingSett Capital are never going to solve the housing crisis with developments like this one, because in many ways, companies like this are the housing crisis. This crisis has never been more lucrative for companies like KingSett, whose company manages $18 billion in assets. When my friend's affordable rental building of 80 units was approved for demolition in June to be turned into condos by KingSett, their lawyer, Cynthia McDougall, who's here today, said in her deputation, and I quote, "I know it's always difficult to remove rental units and replace them. However, what's worse, in fact, is if there is no change." Actually, what's worse, in fact, is that the limited supply of affordable purpose-built rentals is slowly being replaced by housing that only investors can afford. What's worse, in fact, is that we rely on for-profit developers to build all of our housing based on the principle of maximizing profits and not improving communities. And what's worse, in fact, is being told by the very people causing the problem that they are the solution. The solution is right in front of us, and yet we fail to see it because developers and politicians always tell us it doesn't matter what kind of housing we build, just that we build it.
In fact, it actually does matter what kind of housing we build, especially on a site like this. Condo sales in July were at a 27-year low. Why? Because all that is on the market are tiny, unlivable, expensive boxes that even investors won't gamble on when interest rates are high. So now not only do we have housing sitting empty when there's over 10,000 people experiencing homelessness, but if nobody pre-buys these expensive condos, it will halt the development of the only housing we are actually building. Affordable social and non-market housing is the only solution for a site like this and across the city. So I want to end with just one simple suggestion, coming in almost at 3 minutes. Commit to working with 230 Fight Back and No Demevictions to advocate to the province for a first right of refusal legislation, which allows municipalities the ability to purchase land before it goes to the open market, where companies like KingSett will outbid them every single time, which is what we've seen on this site. It has been done in Quebec, and dozens of buildings have been saved as a result. It reduces the number of demevictions because municipalities have the ability to actually buy that land. And then money from the federal government is actually being put to proper use rather than outbidding multi-billion-dollar companies that have more money than we could possibly imagine. I just want to end on one last little point. The building 135 Isabella that was voted and approved in June to be demolished and redeveloped into a condo building, that building, that piece of land that has her building on it, is now being sold by KingSett Capital. So her and her tenants have fought for over 1.5 years of immense stress to be able to negotiate for tenants the best deal that they could possibly get. And now they learn that KingSett is actually selling their building. So they're gonna have to go through this process again. It's the process of land flipping that is not adding value to our housing market in any way whatsoever. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fletcher, go ahead.
So this is something, the buy, rezone, upzone, and flip, that happens quite a bit. And that is the Planning Act, which you seem very familiar with, creates these issues, and it's further, we have less and less power than we did before after the changes in the Planning Act. But I guess you said the developers and councillors are doing that. Are you aware there's some, build anything, just build, right? Build housing. That there are some, I'll call it groups, not yours, but others who are very instrumental in simply giving that message constantly to at public meetings, saying doesn't matter about affordable housing, just build anything. You're aware of those groups like More Neighbors and others like that?
Yes, unfortunately I am.
You are. Unfortunately you are. So we agree that that's just an approach. So it's not just politicians and developers. There's
absolutely
a group of people and a number that constantly are saying, let's not look any deeper, just build it. And your point in the condos, that the market isn't great, but if you're buying in order to resell it, then you're just putting the zoning on. The rental replacement bylaw in the city, how is it working on this site, in your opinion, in order to have to replace those on site or replace them somewhere else?
Sorry, on this application?
Yes, on this application.
To be honest, I don't know if there are people who are currently renting in those spaces that are actually at 214, 230 Sherbourne. Is that the case?
What about 135 Isabella that you mentioned? Is a rental.
Well, what's interesting is that a lot of people have actually moved out of 135 Isabella because of the fear of what's going to happen to their building and them being forced out in advance.
Right.
And so while...
Yeah, I just want you to be aware that you're not personally replacing that, you're replacing the rental. And I'm wondering what happened with that one. I don't remember. Do you remember?
Well, I mean, fundamentally, they're protected by rental replacement bylaws at 135 Isabella. But one of the fundamental issues with that is the rental replacement units only need to be rentals for 20 years. And so what this does is it pushes this problem of affordability further down the road.
I understand, but do you know, I'm going to ask what the rental replacement is in a few of these, because it's the one thing that we have that they didn't take away under bill. What number was that bill? 23. 29. There's so many bills. Just full of bills. But that one was one that we said don't change that because at least the units are there, and I understand people move because they don't know what's going to happen. I got that. It happens all the time. Okay. Thank you very much for coming today.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you so much. Megan. Megan Carver, are you here? Okay, 5 minutes.
Good morning. My name is Megan Carver, and I've worked on the front lines of the housing and opioid crisis in Toronto my whole career. I've spent the past 10 years in the downtown east of Toronto supporting individuals without a place to call home. I am currently a community health worker at Regent Park Community Health Centre, Mr. Moisey, across from your constituent's office. Regent Park Community Health Centre has been providing comprehensive health services.
It's Councillor, I hate to do that to you, but when you're here, he's Councillor Moisey. It's just the rules of procedure. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Regent Park Community Health Centre has been providing comprehensive health and social services for 50 years to community members in the Regent Park and Moss Park neighbourhoods, including those who are precariously housed or homeless, newcomers, families, youth, and First Nations individuals. The work of my community and outreach and support team consists of intensive case management and outreach supporting individuals who are homeless, addressing mental health, addictions, and criminal justice issues, but of course with the biggest desired outcome being housing. At Regent Park Community Health Centre, we recognize that the relationship between homelessness and health are complex, and that safe and affordable housing is necessary for positive health outcomes. Every day we support people dealing with complex health conditions associated with homelessness, such as chronic and infectious diseases, undiagnosed mental health, crisis, cognitive impairments, addictions, and extreme weather-related injuries. Accelerating aging and early onset geriatric conditions is also a common theme, shown by MAP Centre for Urban Health Solutions, a study showing that sleeping outside or in shelter shortens one lifespan by 17 years. Knowing this, we do our best to assist individuals in housing search. We usually start by calling the central intake line, but on the days where we aren't disconnected due to high call volumes, we are informed the shelter is full, there are no beds, and to call back in 2 hours. This is of no surprise to many of us, knowing that Toronto has over 10,000 homeless individuals, and 70% of that number being chronically homeless. Among those seeking shelters are many who are seeking asylum or refugee claimants. I'm sure I don't need to remind you all of the crisis we faced last year, with many of these folks sleeping outside the Assessment and Referral Centre at 129 Peter Street. When we find the shelter system full, we then contact crisis centres and central detox. But while on hold, I prepare my clients for the reality that they will most likely not have a roof over their head that evening. Conversations veer to survival techniques, avoiding conflict with authority and making it through the night alive to meet up again in the morning to repeat the cycle. Encampments and riding on the TTC all night long also have serious safety risks, and others find secluded spots in ravines, cemeteries, empty corridors in the hospital, or find a reason to present at the ER. Handing out a pair of mittens and a Presto Pass is no comparison to finding safe and warm cots to sleep on for the night. Side effects such as from sleep deprivation then enter, such as hallucinations, low distress tolerance skills, and no motivation to improve life circumstances. Not to mention the province's recent announcement that they will be closing the consumption treatment sites, which will inevitably lead to an increase in the visibly homeless on the streets of downtown East. We're all aware of the gravity of the housing crisis in Toronto. I work with the victims and survivors of it every single day. Our jobs are to find housing, but according to the city website, wait time for a one-bedroom is at least 14 years. A mother with a newborn could see her child into high school before securing housing. The average price for a one-bedroom in shared accommodations, according to this city's website, is $1,117. The 214 to 230 Sherbourne development is an ideal location to make a step towards addressing the homeless crisis. Any proposal to amend the official plan and zoning bylaw to permit 46-story residential development containing 615 dwelling units should be to the benefit of 615 of the city's most vulnerable people, especially at the intersection of Dundas and Sherbourne. If the city is going to build housing here, let's make it in the form of housing that we need most in Toronto: safe, subsidized housing units. We need rent-geared to income housing and supportive housing so that both individual and community health can thrive. On behalf of Regent Park Community Health Centre, Please deny this application for a high-rise condo that will not serve people in the most need in the downtown east, and instead, please move towards building subsidized and supportive housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Any
Question.
Okay, Councilor Bravo, go ahead.
Well, thank you very much for bringing all of these issues to our attention. You have on this committee members of the Board of Health, and I'm Chair of Economic and Community Development Committee, and so are members here where we hear about and understand everything you're telling us about the provincial decisions around safe injection and around the lack of affordable housing. My question had to do with a policy that exists in Montreal, for example. Montreal has the power of first refusal. So if there's a piece of land like this that have been identified as strategic for the city, in Montreal, they would be able to be notified first and be able to purchase the land. Would you agree that that would be a positive thing if the provincial government would allow the City of Toronto to do that? So as you say, we could say this is a strategic location, we need to build housing that's affordable and that provides the services that are needed.
Would it be a benefit for the province?
Be able, because in a private transaction, right, we don't get notified about, there's no
Absolutely
process.
be beneficial to be notified, yes.
Yeah, so and notified, and then there's a second piece, which not just notification, but that there's a right of first refusal, that means that if it's going for sale, the city can say, wait a minute, we want to make the offer first, because this piece of land has strategic value, and we have all these objectives that we have at the city, which we, I think, share with in policy and ways that we're advancing with the deputants. It would be great if the province would let us do that, I think. And if Montreal can do that, then we wouldn't be in this situation in many ways. And certainly in my ward, we have buildings that have come up with the community, like in this situation, have had real sites on it and have plans and momentum, but we don't know about the transaction because it's all in the private real estate. Yeah, so I just put that on your radar as like how could it help? Would it help? Like what could you imagine could happen in that situation? I'm just trying to.
If the city had option for first refusal and had the goal of building affordable housing, of course, yes, it would help our community much more.
Great, and the second question I think is just around so the housing plan that there exists looks at taking owning more land, taking city land, and not necessarily, and the way that the model before was to give it to developers to develop and put in affordable housing. So we're trying to encourage social ownership. Do you think that would be helpful for serving the objectives that you've identified and the urgent needs that you've identified?
Yes, we do.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Gayton Heroes? Gayton? Gayton Heroes. Okay, 5 minutes, go ahead.
Yeah, I was 53 years old when we began to fight for 230. 53 years old. I'm going to be 70 next year. 16 years. And I know you have a lot. I know it's tough with the province. 16 years. And in March of 2022, the city bid for that property.
Yes, it did.
And KingSett outbid you. And who is KingSett? There was a rep here earlier on. I think he's gone. Who are they? You do business with them. Did you not ever ask your question? Why did they bid against the city when you give them contracts at 705 Warden? Did you not ask that question? And when you buy buildings off them at 877 Yonge, this is the group of people who hid behind a number, a company number, incorporated number, and refused to tell those seniors what was going on in the summer of 2019. That was KingSett. That was Bill Logar, Rob Coomer, David Vernon, John Love's the CCO. Did we not all see what happened that summer? The story when it came out, is it happening in Mississauga right now? It happened to be KingSett. And then we're told that somehow there's negotiations that have been going on after we went to your office, Councilor Morris, and we asked you. And at that time, by the way, you said we lost the battle, blah, blah, but then KingSett offered, and yes, there was negotiation, and the mayor also. But we're told you can't agree. You can't agree on a price because they want too much money. You know what they're doing. You say it, they're greedy. You openly say it. And the city says, we won't pay for that, it's too much money. And yet, while these negotiations are going on, in January of this year, the city gave them almost $10 million in tax cuts for the West Mall. You did that. What you can do today is say no to them. These are people you do business with. Stop doing business with them while this is going on. 214, 230 was part of your plan. It was in your documents that you wanted it to help develop Dan Harrison. KingSett knew that. John Love knew that. That's who these people are. They don't care. And you can say no today. Councilor Morris, it's important that you say no. Because if you say yes, none of these councilors will oppose you. None. Because it's your turf. There's an unwritten rule where that happens. You don't touch somebody else's turf. So it's up to you today to do that. And I'm going to finish my story. I got about a minute and 44, 45, 40, okay. I met a woman last year. Her name was Betty Robinson. She was 101 when I met her. She was one of those seniors who was being evicted that summer in 2019. She refused to sign. And as a result of that, she stayed in her home. All the other seniors went, and this is just before COVID, right? And all those other seniors went into, COVID-invested old age homes. And I met her. She still lives there on the 14th floor. For a year and a half, she sat in this empty building by herself. 16 stories, the city eventually bought the building. Somehow, she managed to keep her home. Not because of counselors, not because of advocates, but she did it. And she's a real inspiration for us. And all I want to say is whatever you decide today, you have to know that any developer, whether it's KingSett, whether they sell the land, anybody who supports them, if you intend to come on that territory at Dundas and Sherbourne and build a condo, you're going to run into a mine. There's going to be a fight. We're going to fight you. And we're going to fight you hard. And today you have to choose which side you're on. And we're listening and watching. We're watching.
Thank you. So I do have a question for you. No? Okay. All right. No questions. That's fine. Thank you.
No.
Barrick, and thank you for coming in today. Barrick Germain.
Why not? I'm curious why there's no question.
Barrick German, are you here?
Well, that was nasty, Gordon.
Barrick German?
That was pretty nasty, Gordon.
Is Barrick German here?
I'm here. You're tired? Yeah, I know you're tired. We're all tired. Pretty nasty.
You have 5 minutes. Go ahead.
So we're talking about a historic property. Affordable housing was one on that property. In the 1980s, I was there with others, and Drina Joubert froze to death on that property. There was an inquest. We called for an inquest, and we participated in an inquest. And 3,000 units for singles came right across Ontario. 3,000 units. But even bigger, single people could get subsidies across Ontario. We can do this kind of thing, or we can try and put a nail in the coffin of affordability. In this room are many people who over the years have fought for reforms, for housing, and there have been many, many wins, and this city has changed in that sense. This city uses funds that come from a declaration across the country that we had a national disaster on our hands. I was involved in that intimately. And the people in this room have been involved over many years and will become involved again and again and again. We will not let this ride. You have a choice now. If you put that unaffordable housing on that corner, a tall, unaffordable building, it will do what it's meant to do. As tall as it is, it will heat up the prices of land in that whole territory. It will put a nail in the coffin of affordability on that street. We know that there had been plans to use some of that property, for the city to buy that property and to put prefabs on that property and have all of the buildings, the Toronto community housing buildings, renovated so that people could come to that property and live in that property, and their rooms would be renovated, because on that street are numerous public housing units that have to be renovated. If not, we'll lose them. You have to look at the bigger picture. We can't any longer just hand things on to kings. We can't let it happen. Staff, who knows what their relationship is with KingSett Capital? Who knows? I'm certain that many politicians are quite frightened. But the people who live in the area are more frightened. They've been sitting there watching that building stand there empty, watching them die, as did the councillors, as did most people, as did the bureaucrats in this city. Many of the bureaucrats in this city live on funding that advocates got for them. And now we will continue this fight, as Gaetan said, and others have said. We won't let this go. We can't let this go. This affects people across this city. If you're going to hand the city over to KingSett, at least say so. Let's not pretend any longer. You know that if a building goes on that corner, it will create unaffordability all the way up the road. And you do need a property where you can where you can begin to renovate the buildings on that street. They go all the way down to my building. So do the right thing. Do what people did in the 1980s.
Okay.
Let's have some affordable housing.
You have 10 seconds, sir.
Let's look after our people. Let's look after our people. And we're going to be watching very, very closely.
Thank you.
This is not the end of this.
Any questions? Thank you, Miguel, for doing this. I appreciate you following instructions very clearly.
Well, they were, everybody was here when we had to save all the TCHC houses, so we learned how to do that.
Cynthia McDougall? 5 minutes.
Good morning. My name is Cynthia McDougall. I'm here for KingSett. Before you is a planning report recommending approval of official plan and zoning bylaw amendment. And it's a positive staff report. It also provides for recommendations to provide for the restoration, conservation of the Deneen House. The site is vacant. There are no tenants that are going to be displaced. There have been a lot of powerful community spokespeople addressing their views on how the site should be used. In this case, before you is a report asking you to use your legislative function to either approve or not approve the zoning and official plan amendment. And I would urge you to adopt the recommendations of staff. And I would also point out that there is a very strong endorsement from the Cabbagetown, the South Cabbagetown Residents Association. In fact, it's enthusiastic. And so there are different views in the community. I recognize it's been a very, very long morning, so I was going to just end my comments at this point and answer any questions you may have.
Any other questions from staff, from councillors, committee members? Seeing none. Thank you.
My name is Allison Fulby, and I am the priest director at All Saints Church Community Center, which is located on the southeast corner of Dundas and Sherbourne, directly across the street from 230. And as you've all heard today, Dundas and Sherbourne has been an intersection of need for many, many years. I would say over 60. Some would say dating back to the First World War. And we, All Saints, have been advocating for affordable housing in the neighborhood since 1968. We started a drop-in center in 1970, and we opened Canada's first overnight church respite, what's now called Out of the Cold, in 1972. And since then, Toronto's housing crisis has gotten worse, not better. With gentrification coming from all directions, Dundas and Sherbourne has become the corner of last resort. An increasing number of people without housing call Dundas and Sherbourne home. And they will not be able to afford the condominiums proposed for Sherbourne Street, whether they are built by KingSett Capital or Fitzrovia Real Estate or any other for-profit developer. The Fitzrovia development has already been approved. KingSett Capital's has not. And this means, theoretically, that there is still a chance to build housing for people without homes in a neighborhood where they already live and in a neighborhood that can support them, and at an intersection that has supported some of Toronto's most vulnerable people for over 60 years. People are homeless because they don't have housing. And while All Saints Church does its best to support people who are struggling, we can't house people, much as we try. And if we as a city want to solve homelessness, we have to build housing for the people who don't have it. And that we can include developers if they are so inclined. In the 1960s and 70s, when developers were buying up and demolishing rooming houses across Toronto, especially in the downtown east, Sherbourne and Dundas, the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation partnered with a private developer named Fred Breda to build Canada's first high-rise rooming house in 1970. Designed by architect Thomas Kuhlman, located north of Dundas at 266 Sherbourne, a 13-story building with 120 units opened. Am I boring people? This is actually quite interesting. I would like people to listen. own councillor is not listening. Okay.
Pause the time. I know I would
Yes.
like to, as a point of privilege, I think it's really important to remember that the local councillor is also the chair of this committee. This agenda has 50 items on it. We are all working on a bunch of different items that are on this agenda. In addition, sorry, but I think that the respect has to be mutual. I would say that the chair is, his responsibility is to work with all of us as we move through the agenda. We're at the same time working on all the other issues on the agenda. So I regret that we have to listen with one ear and type emails and talk to each other with the rest of ourselves. But I assure you that people are not doing that out of disrespect or that because they don't want to listen. It's because we have multiple responsibilities. So I would ask you to please stop addressing the chair in that way. He is our peer here, and he might not be able to say that for himself, but he's working his butt off right now. Thank you.
Sorry about that. I'm not used to people standing up and walking around while I'm talking, that's all. So yes, there is a very interesting building at 266 Sherbourne Street, which was built with a partnership between the Canada Mortgage Housing Corporation and a private developer. It is studied by urbanists all over the world, and it is still standing. It was a private development. It has 120 units, and it is still providing rooms for people who need it. It is not ideal. It is certainly not deeply affordable in the way that it is needed by that neighborhood. But at the time it was constructed, it represented an innovative response to the housing crisis of the time. And we are, of course, now at another crisis point, which, if the city chooses, can be an opportunity to help the most vulnerable among us, rather than putting the profit motive above all considerations. And so I'm here to request that the City Council reject this rezoning proposal, and instead asking the city and the Canada Mortgage Housing Corporation, though I know they're not here, and KingSett to work together to seek an alternative development that would provide housing for the people who are already living at Dundas and Sherbourne. And this housing should be affordable and deeply supportive. I do have serious concerns about what will happen to the safety of our neighbors if the current proposed development goes through in its current form. We are already anticipating the closure of 3 overdose prevention sites in our neighborhood and expecting overdoses to increase, particularly at our corner. And just to let you know, there were 14 in our parking lot last August. I don't see condo owners liking that happening right across the street from where they're living. We know that and that 14 was on a single day, FYI. Homelessness is a significant factor in drug abuse. The closure of the overdose prevention sites, coupled with further gentrification, will push our city's most vulnerable people into deserted alleyways and most likely death. The empty lot at 214, 230 Sherbourne offers a historic opportunity to provide housing for those who need it most, the people who don't have it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions of deputies? Seeing none, thank you. Wasim Ghani, you here? Okay, you have 5 minutes, go ahead.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Wasim. I think this oath of office, which binds you to work in the best interest of the people. So why is it that in this case, the interest of the people is being trumped by the interest of one developer?
Councillor Sachs, if you leave, I will not have quorum. Councillor Fletcher is on her way out. Actually, Councillor Bradford is back. Okay, we're good. Councillor Bradford is back. Thank you.
Shall I repeat? Because I was interrupted. Let me just...
I will reset your time. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm saying that your oath of office binds you to work in the best interests of the people. So why is it that in this case, the interest of the people, of the community, is being trumped by the interest of one developer, KingSett Capital? What's in it for you? Why must you side with the greedy and the people who want to have profit at any cost? I don't think it's really a very wise thing for the councillors, and I'm not advising you. But I feel as a resident of this area that when you don't listen to people, it's not even good for your political careers. I don't know. I just feel that, I'm not going to vote for the councillor that I voted for because that person has changed his colors or is not listening to us. It's really, I went door knocking with the councillor. He perhaps recalls that. But, if you don't listen to the people, we are going to not support you anymore. And there may be other people who will have same views about your performances. I know that, you have to abide by laws and regulations and so on, but you make the laws and regulations, and you are such experts at red tape and at stopping things and delaying things to allow KingSett to obtain the property, and then to go for making a condo tower 46-story high in an area that is populated by just the absolute poorest of the people. It's really a cruel joke. It's not a joke. It's just plain cruelty. I really sincerely request all of you to, for some time, think from your heart. You're talking about people, human lives. This is not business as usual. We should not just always be slick and smart and, glib and, we can change this from that. I know you people have golden tongues, yes, but think from your heart. Think again what you're doing to people. And that is the area that 230 is situated. It's the area where the poorest of the people live. That is a little enclave now. The developers have pushed people out and out and out of the city. Where will the poor people go when you have pushed them all out? Even in the outer side of Toronto, people are talking against the poor people, the people who suffer most, who are sick, who are unhealthy, who suffer from abject poverty. Nobody is willing to receive, to accept people who are not dressed well, who don't speak well, who don't follow the nitty-gritty of the law, because you people say, well, you should all be nice and speak nicely. Angry people, desperate people never speak nicely. And even you, all of you have experienced that kind of situation. Don't tell me that you've always been rich and you never had to suffer the indignity of want and need and, the oppression of the system. Please, think again. Don't just be glib and just, support each other. Well, because he has proposed something, I must support him and that kind of thing. I know that happens in politics, but don't do it this time. We're talking about just a little area in the city. Let them live there. That is the only place they have left now. Where will they go? And think of the consequences of pushing people out. There may be social issues. You will end up spending more money. Just the other day, I came to know that the city is spending something like $4 million or $10 million, I forget, on giving a contract to some guard company to look after people, so-called unhoused people in the parks and so on. I'm not confirming this, but I read it somewhere. Now, the city has to spend money to look after, to guard people and to do all those things. Spend that money on making social housing. Why must you do that? And I want to ask KingSett Capital, you have so much money, millions of dollars.
You're at time, sir.
Okay, well, KingSett and everyone, we are not backing down.
Okay.
And you should remember, we will not back down ever.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to ask for a motion to extend the speak. Is anyone able to stay beyond 12? Okay, I guess we'll just have to. All right, so we'll do one more speaker, and then we'll go on lunch. Miguel Avila Ferlardi.
Good afternoon. Hi, Chris.
No?
Well, I call you in that manner because I respect you as a former runner councilor for Ward 13 in 2022. I have a lot of respect because I know you work hard. And this is the most important decision of your life as a political figure. Because you know, you need 2 terms and a half to receive the golden pension plan that all city councilors want to have. It is that true. So two and a half is what you need. So right here, we are all know the business of the city. And you have to make a decision that will really will cost you political life. If you voted in favor, the chances of you getting reelected is next to 0. This has been the longest battle in the city of Toronto. Many of us, when we started, we have black hair. Look at us. Now we have gray hair because previous mayors, Rob Ford and his brother Doug Ford, they will never support housing for the poor. John Tory, 8 years, wasting in approval condominiums. The whole corridor down the street had changed dramatically. All the affordable housing units are gone. Our neighbors have been displaced. Our youth are moving out of the city. I think Councilor Bradford called him all the time. He said many people are leaving the city. Many of them, when he was running for mayor, exactly pointed out that people cannot afford to live in the city. And many of you city councilors have your own incumbents problems, your own nightmares. And your members are asking at your door, what are you gonna do about it? So today is an important decision that will turn around the winnings of the large corporations in approving condominiums who we know that sitting empty. The pre-sales of condominiums has gone down 80%. The condo bubble is bursting. Please, we are here to ask you to do the right thing, Councilor Chris Moyes. Say no to this proposal. We know that rezoning is going to make them more profitable, more rich. We know that KingSett will not retain the property if someone comes with big money. And they're not going to build affordable housing. Look what they done to in 2019, as my brother Gaetan mentioned. Seniors were kicked out of their homes. Same has happened in Mississauga. And you guys are giving them $10 million in tax breaks. You know, this is not right. We're seeing that the bad corporations are getting away with crime. And that's not allowed. It's not good for us as citizens. We want to be abiding citizens. But this situation is making us to become more vocal, more consistent in being here, like since 8 o'clock this morning. And supporting my friends, Gaetan, John Clark, Waliko Gali. Everyone here wants one thing from you, that you vote no to this proposal. And let's make sure that KingSett get the message clear that the city wants to build housing to deal with our homeless crisis and addictions. As you know, that is one corner that nobody wants to be around there. Sherbourne and Dundas at nighttime is scary as hell. But if we have a condominium, what positive message is going to bring to all of us? You know, Toronto police are asking for more money. Why not we dedicate funding and transfer to the housing sector and build more housing for our people? Thank you, Chris, and I hope you listen to us.
Thank you. Any questions for the deputant? Seeing none. We will recess for lunch.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also follow us on social media, and for more information, check out our website.